Um, we are in Judges, of course, Judges chapter 3, and we are looking at if the story of Yael and the tent peg got me into the Bible, the story of Ehud kept me in the Bible. Okay? Because Ehud is the one, you read a story of Yael and the tent peg and you think, well, that was weird. It's a shame there's not more of that. And then you discover 2 chapters before, there's an even more entertaining story. Then you think, maybe there's a lot more in the Bible than I had realized. But I will tell you that I haven't yet figured out this story. So I'm not going to have as many cutesy little things to share with you because I'm still figuring the story out. It is in the Bible for a reason. And I haven't gotten all the dots connected. And because of the tendency towards moralism, so I've listened to devotionals, I've read commentaries, I've listened to, I've even read like sermon manuscripts, from past pastors and present, and most moralize it, particularly when it comes to the left hand. God can do anything if you just give yourself to Him, and that's true. But we moralize the text so much, and I do my best to avoid that. But of course, the connection of every judge we come across in this book, it's a repeat of the same theme, that despite of our sin, God delivers sinners. That's the main theme. So even if we don't touch on it specifically, there's Jesus right there. So if the Othniel narrative that we saw last week was basic and boring, it was supposed to be basic and boring. It was an outline of what every story is going to be, and we're going to follow the same outline. Othniel had no action in it. It was just the facts, ma'am. It was Israel was bad. God got angry. He sent Othniel to deliver them, and they all lived happily ever after for a few years. Then he died, right? And that's the model. Well, Ehud is the opposite of Othniel. Othniel's on the boring side, very basic. Ehud, full of action, and what we love so much about it is it's full of humor. Now, I doubt we'll be able to pull all the humor out. In fact, I think you could read the story 1,000 times and discover more humor. The writer clearly wants us to laugh and to see particularly the Moabites as the butt of the joke. So let's start here, same outline we had last week. The writer combines the story of disobedience and discipline within 3 verses. It was better divided with Othniel, but here they put them together a little more. So right away, we see in verse 12 the same thing that we saw last week. It's the same exact language. We talked about it some last week. The people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. It goes on, the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel because they had done what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He gathered to himself the Ammonites and the Amalekites and went and defeated Israel. They took possession of the city of palms, and the people of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, 18 years. So you see right away that you have disobedience. People did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. That was repeated in the story of Othniel. I believe it's the first verse there. Chapter 3, verse 7. The people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of God, Lord. But you'll notice here in verse 12, it's repeated twice. So right at the beginning, people of Israel did again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And you come to the end of the verse, because they had done what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Now, you've heard me say this 1,000 times. Repetition is emphasis. Repetition is emphasis. And in Hebrew, you don't have a highlighter. You don't have capital letters. You don't have anything like that. So if you want to make something clear, you just repeat it. And we're actually going to see several examples of that in the Ehud story. And so remember what we said about this phrase. In the Bible, from my study of it, and I'm sure there's an example where I'm wrong, but in my study of it, that phrase is used of Israel, the people of God, who are going after idols. Because what they're guilty of is not just being bad people, but worshiping the wrong gods. And that theology affects their practical living. And so their idolatry has led to acts of sin. They are doing what is evil in the sight of God. But you'll notice here right in the middle, so it works like a sandwich or an Oreo, right? So they did what was evil in the sight of the Lord at the beginning, same thing at the end, and right there in the middle is God's act of judgment against them, the discipline. And the Lord strengthened Eglon, king of Moab, against Israel. Now, there's a few things going on. You can see it a little bit in English. In the sight of the Lord, and the Lord strengthened. You see the repetition of Lord. In the Hebrew, and I don't understand all of this, the word and in our English is the word strengthen in Hebrew. So it literally reads, Yahweh strengthened, Yahweh strengthened. Now, what I'm not saying is you should translate it that way, because that makes no sense to me. Okay? And I'm not a Hebrew scholar, nor would I dare to play one on the telly. But what you do have is a repetition of the same Hebrew. So in English, we would bring it out of the end of one phrase, that it was evil in the sight of the Lord, and Yahweh strengthened. But I think what we're supposed to see, and I couldn't find many resources talking about this, that the Hebrew wants us to emphasize how God strengthened not the Israelites, which is what we expect. So when Moses holds up his hands against the Amalekites, God strengthens Israel. When Joshua goes out against this nation or that, or this city-state or that, God strengthens Israel. Here, it is to emphasize the one in whom we're doing evil in the sight of God, that God, Yahweh, then strengthens their enemy. And here, it is King Eglon of the Moabites. Now, the choice of the Moabites is interesting. You remember that last week with Othniel, you have a northern king in Syria coming all the way down. Here, I meant to put a map up, so forgive me. Here what you have is if you have, think of the Dead Sea, to the east of the Dead Sea are the Moabites. And so they are right there where Benjamin and Ephraim, the two main tribes that we'll see in the story. They can easily just cross over the Jordan River, and they're right there. So this makes clear sense. Moab is bordering Benjamin and Ephraim and a little bit of Judah. But Moabites, of course, are cousins of Israel. And because Abraham was Abraham was Lot's uncle. So Abraham's father was Lot's grandfather. Am I getting that right? So Abraham and Lot's father were brothers. Okay, so they share Terah there, this is why in the Bible the Moabites and the Israelites have a love-hate relationship. At times they tolerate each other's presence. At other times they despise each other. And this is an example when they despise each other. Of course, the Moabites descend from Lot through his daughter. The Ammonites are the same situation, following the Sodom and Gomorrah narrative. And that sort of added to the dislike of the two sides. The most prominent Moabite in the Bible, and really in the time of Judges, is, of course, Ruth. Remember that Elimelech, my God is king, takes his wife named Princess. So the king has a princess, and he takes his two boys, sick and dying, Mahlon and Chilion, and they leave the house of bread, Bethlehem, because of famine. So judgment language. And they go to the Moabites. Well, that makes sense. Moabites are just right there. And there, what they find is the sick and dying get sick and they die. And now, my God is king, who left the land where God is king, he dies. So you have three widows. Naomi changes her name to Mara, bitter, and she goes back to Bethlehem. But one of the widows stays, Orpah. So you always got to make sure you're not saying Oprah. So Orpah, yes. And then, of course, Ruth comes over, right? And she's the one who expresses the most faith in the whole story. She's a Moabitess. And not only that, but she is the great-grandmother of David. So in the Davidic line is a Moabite. In fact, when David is running from Saul, he eventually gets to where he has nowhere else to turn. So he ends up going to the land of the Moabites. He takes his whole family over there to protect them. And interestingly, when David becomes king, he wars against them. So this is love-hate relationship with the Moabites. And here we see them on the hate side. And so he forges quite an impressive alliance. The first is the Ammonites. Again, these are cousins of Moab because Ammon and Moab have the same father, but different mothers. So what does that make them? Oh, that makes them half-brothers. Oh, man. I'm a Kentuckian and I didn't even see that. They're not first cousins. They're half brothers. Oh.
You heard that song,
They were reading this story. But now the Ammonites are almost always antagonists against the Israelites. And they will show up later in the story of Jephthah. He's the one who makes the foolish vow regarding his daughter. Later in the monarchy, Saul will defeat a king of the Ammonites named Nahash. Remember, Nahash means serpent. It's just the word means serpent. David will later slay and defeat the seed of the serpent, the son of Nahash. You remember that story. We've looked at this before. The seed of the serpent narrative from Genesis 3:15, that you'll crush the head of the serpent. So it's interesting that David slays him. But anyways, they are Ammonites. It was in one of those battles with the Ammonites that David stays home and commits adultery with Bathsheba. Solomon will later marry an Ammonite and allows her to bring all of her idolatry, which stays in Israel till the days of Josiah. Josiah finally gets rid of all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, there in verse 13 is Eglon the Moabite gets the Ammonites and the Amalekites. And the Amalekites come up whenever people are critical of the Bible. For one, they are cousins of Israel through Esau, book of Genesis. Amalek was Esau's grandson. So you can do the tree math there. They are the ones who famously attacked Israel during the wilderness. This is where, we just mentioned, Moses is holding up thing. And they become such a nuisance. They're more like nomadic people. And so they're just constantly attacking Israel, that God tells Moses, wipe them out. Just completely wipe them out. Because of their guerrilla warfare against them. They remain a nuisance throughout Judges. Eventually, God orders Saul to exterminate them, but he disobeys. You remember the story of King Agag. Samuel comes, and Saul's bragging, look, I've got the king. I can, and Samuel, he just hacks Agag to pieces. And you remember where the story ends. It ends in the story of Esther. Haman is a descendant of Agag. So Haman is an Amalekite. So these people start with Esau, the line of Esau, but really the story of Moses, and they're just antagonists over and over until finally you get this incredible story of God delivering Israel from an Amalekite. And he uses a Persian to bring judgment upon Haman, the Amalekite. Notice what you have here is that combined, they defeat Israel and they take possession of the city of the palms there at the end of verse 13. This city, something I didn't know, is the city of Jericho. Let me prove it to you biblically. Here's two references where it says the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, and here again, kinsfolk at Jericho, the city of palm trees. So this seems to have been a nickname of it. And now, if you know your Bible, you're thinking, okay, for one, I didn't know Eglon did this, but didn't God put a curse on Joshua or on Jericho? Well, that's because you've been reading Joshua. After Jericho falls, Joshua puts a curse on the city. You'll never rebuild this place. And so what do we do with Eglon? One, he could be ignorant of this, and we see that having built a palace here at Jericho, what happens to Eglon? It could be he knows of the curse and is defying the God of Israel. And I actually sort of favor that. We don't really know his motivation, but I kind of favor that. It sounds like something Eglon would do. But what we can conclude is that he is attacking the tribe of Reuben. So you got the Benjaminites and Reuben and Ephraim are all sort of like right here. And Jericho is right with the Reubenites. You notice there in verse 14, he rules for 18 years. Now, archaeology is a fun little discipline that answers a lot of questions, but raises 1,000 more. For every one it answers, you have to ask about 10,000 more. Now, I am not an expert on this, and I couldn't find a lot of information on it. It is possible we have found Eglon's palace in Jericho. I put a photo of it. This is Jericho in general here. Danny would be good. I don't know if Danny went out there. But there's a certain location where you go Jericho. It looks like after the main Jericho fell, this other palace came. And we get descriptions of it here with Ehud. But one of the prominent theories is, because of the dating and everything else, this would be Eglon's palace. For one, Jericho, once it was destroyed, it really wasn't built up again. So to have a later property is significant. So you can go out to Israel now. Jericho's just I mean, look at it. You can drive around it if you want to, but ain't nothing there. It's just ruins now. But it's possible that now we don't have a rock that says King Eglon was here. The obese king. We don't have anything like that. But what we do have is circumstantial evidence to suggest. And if you're interested in that, I can point you to some resources. Okay, so that's all that. Everything else is about the deliverance of Israel. So let's start here in verse 15, the fun part. Then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord, and the Lord raised up for them a deliverer, Ehud the son of Gera the Benjaminite, a left-handed man. The people of Israel sent tribute by him to Eglon, the king of Moab, and Ehud made for himself a sword with two edges, a cubit, 18 inches or so, in length, and he bound it on his right thigh under his clothes. He presented the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now Eglon was a very fat man, and when Ehud had finished presenting the tribute, he sent away the people who carried the tribute. But he himself turned back at the idols near Gilgal and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. And he commanded silence, and all his attendants went out from his presence. Ehud came to him as he was sitting alone in his cool roof chamber. Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. And he arose from his seat. Ehud reached with his left hand, took the sword from his right thigh, and thrust it into his belly. The hilt also went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, and he did not pull the sword out of his belly, and the dung came out. Then Ehud went out into the porch and closed the doors of the roof chamber behind him and locked them. This is the part we all remember. All right? Now, this may be the first time the story's been read in this church in 60 years. I don't know. Now, it's just one of those stories. It's there. What are you going to do with it? Well, a couple things to note here. First of all, it tells us that Israel, after 18 years of living under the thumb of King Eglon, they cry out to the Lord. And remember we said last week, that language is not the language of repentance. It's the language of suffering. It's first used, if memory serves me right, of when Israel in Egypt cried out for deliverance. So we are again to see this as a type of Exodus. Exodus and Noah are the two most important stories, and Eden, three most important stories in understanding Joshua and Judges. So here is an Exodus reference, I believe, that we have here. And you'll notice that they cried out to the Lord, and the Lord raised up. So in the Hebrew, Lord is repeated twice in a row. They cried out to the Lord, Lord answered. Yahweh answered. They cried out to Yahweh, Yahweh answered. And so it meshes them together. There's no commas in Hebrew. So that we get that repetition. And now notice that just as God strengthened Eglon, so now he raises up Ehud. And we're going to see who's the strongest. Okay? Now, we're introduced to Ehud there at the end of verse 15, and we're told a few things about him. One, his name is Ehud. I came across several meanings of his name, so I don't know which one's right because I'm not a Hebrew scholar. One is, it means I will give thanks, or even where is the majesty. So it's either a statement, I will give thanks, or it's a question, where is the majesty? If it's a question, which my main commentary suggested it was, it is similar to the name Ichabod, which means where is the glory? And so do with that whatever it is that you want. Gera, he's the son of Gera. It's interesting that Benjamin, the original Benjamin, had a son named Gera. That makes sense because Ehud, the son of Gera, was a Benjaminite. And there are several Geras throughout the Bible, and all of them, from what I was able to find, are associated with the tribe of Benjamin. Now, Judges ends very critical of the tribe of Benjamin. And there are some scholars suggest that the end of Judges chronologically takes place in chapters 1 and 2. If we are to make that conclusion, and I don't know how you would come up with all that, it's beyond my expertise, then what you have is the author is giving you a good Benjaminite, followed by a bunch of bad Benjaminites. And if you keep reading your Bible, you skip Ruth, you come into 1 Samuel, you meet another Benjaminite, Saul. He starts out good, but he ends bad. Right? And it's just interesting that the book of Judges does seem to have something going on with this tribe. But the big detail of Ehud is he's left-handed. Are any of y'all left-handed by chance? I should have figured, Don. That's what's wrong with you. You're left-handed. Sometimes. See, clearly the mind of a lefty. So I'm right-handed, but I bat left. My grandfather, I was having a struggle with batting, and he goes, son, why don't you just switch sides? Okay, and I started hitting it. I bat left. And the reason is because my right arm is dominant, and I struggle understanding right-hand batters. Your right is on the top, right? For me, batting left, I didn't plan on going into this. To me, I'm actually holding on to the bat with my right hand. So it makes sense to me to bat left because I'm favoring. So it's my right foot that's coming out, which is really where you're targeting, and then a bat. Well, you would not believe how many times, especially when I was a youth pastor, we had a church softball team and a youth softball team. And I get up there at the bat for the first time. And they know I was a sports junkie. I love sports. And I get up there at the bat, just mind my own business, and someone goes, oh, you're right-handed though, right, Brother Kyle? Yeah, I'm right-handed. Good. Well, you need to be on the other end of the bat. Like, leave me alone. I've done this for years. Right? And then that's when your ego gets the best of you. You think, I'm aiming right for you, second baseman. You know? But this detail, being left-handed, we do spend a lot of time with it, and it is an important detail in the narrative. It's because he's left-handed that he's able to sneak a weapon into the palace, what a buffoon that is, and to assassinate the king. The question is, what do we do with this? There's two main conclusions. One, he's left-handed by force. That is to say, his right hand is handicapped. Now, your translation may try to bring that out. I don't know. But many look into Hebrew and they come to that conclusion. And so this is where a lot of your preachers will come along and then moralize the text and say, see, God used a man who was probably made fun of his whole life, limited in all that he could do because society's right-hand favored, because only 10% of the population is left-handed, at least modern population. And yet God still used him even though he didn't have a good right. I don't know. It seems like you're taking something that isn't clear and you're making it a main point of the text. And Alistair Begg is good about saying the main thing, the clear things are the main things, and the main things are the clear things. And I'm not sure this is a clear thing, because there's another possibility for us to interpret this that I actually think has more biblical evidence for it. And that is one of the most important details is that Ehud is of the tribe of Benjamin. And we know in the Bible the Benjaminites were known to be ambidextrous. I've worked on that word today, ambidextrous. That is that they were trained to be skilled with both the right and the left. So let me see if I can show you just a few examples. Later in Judges 20, civil war, so some Benjaminites do awful things. 700 chosen men who were left-handed. Every one could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. So notice that what you have are skilled men of war, the Benjaminites. They were known for their warfare. And here, now, they are all left-handed. Now, what are the chances? An entire tribe of people, 700 people from the same tribe. Let's say 700 people who are all warriors from the east side of Frankfort. They're all left-handed and only left-handed. Well, that would be an incredible softball team, perhaps. But what you probably have here is that, sure, some of them were probably favored their left. But they're ambidextrous. Let me see if we can come up more evidence of this. Is that later we get this in 1 Chronicles. They were bowmen, these are Benjaminites, and could shoot arrows and sling stones with either the right or the left hand. They were Benjaminites, Saul's kinsmen. So this is very clear in the text, that what set the Benjaminites apart is that they would use the right and the left. Now, if you, in warfare, now Benjaminites here are described largely as bowmen and slings, but if you are in hand-to-hand combat with sword and shield, because everyone favors the right, you're going to guard with your left, you're going to swing with your right. Now, what if that switched? Does that throw you off? Because you've trained mostly with right-handed warriors. Now, let me see if I can illustrate this. When I played baseball, I have a baseball back here from when I was pitching as a kid. Okay, I'm still proud of myself from that one game, many years ago. But even though I bat left, I struggle with left-handed batters. The reason is because you'll have 10 batters right in a row, just boom, boom, boom. They're all batting right-handed. And your mind thinks, okay, the bat's going to come here. This is the inside. This is the outside. And I love that game of pitching. And then you get that one kid batting left. And I remember I would just, it'd take me a minute.
You know, some of that's your dominant eye and stuff like that.
Right, right.
I shoot a rifle left-handed, a pistol with either hand, drive a nail with either hand, right-handed, throw left-handed.
Yeah. So you're our very own Ehud.
I can breathe underwater above.
So it is my theory then, because I favor this, that he's ambidextrous. I think Ehud is a leading warrior of the Benjaminites. Because what you'll get is a lot of people, because they favor that the hand is handicapped, his right hand's handicapped, so he had to learn to use the left, that he is an unlikely leader. I'm not sure we're getting that in the text. I think we should read him like Othniel. He's a military leader that when given the opportunity, he stepped up and led, and God used him to deliver Israel. That's the way I'm reading it. I could be wrong, but that's the way I read it. So in verses 16 to 26 is when he assassinates the king. Now, he gets the 18-inch dagger, so a cubit is usually a grown man from his elbow to tip of his finger, about 18 inches, and it's specifically made for him. It has to hide in his cloak. It's double-edged so that this can enhance the thrusting. So he isn't going to come in swinging, he's going to thrust, and that is to be quicker so he can just thrust and leave. He wants to assassinate the king and escape. Because his plan is not just to kill the king. With the king down, the kingdom is in danger, so now we can come along. For those who may remember when President Reagan was almost assassinated, you remember the shaky press conferences after that? Because with technology, you had a vice president, but no one could hardly get a hold of him. He was in the air, coming back to D.C., and so it was the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, stood up and said, I'm in charge of the country.
Al Haig.
Yeah. What was his role?
Secretary of State.
Secretary of State.
He said, I'm in charge in the White House.
Yeah. I mean, scandalous, because it should be the Speaker of the House, not Secretary of State. But you can see that we're really vulnerable at that moment. Really vulnerable. And that's the plan. Get rid of the king, and then they're doing that. Well, verse 17 tells us, so if Ehud is left-handed, that's a big detail. Ehud's weight is the other. Now, the narrator does have a sense of humor, because the name Eglon means bull or calf, but it looks and sounds like the word, so it's a play on words, meaning round or rotund. So when you read this, it's got a lot of humor in it, and we're to read it like that. That the writer of Judges wants us to laugh at this king. And so if you Google this passage and look for sermons, you'll find goofy titles all the time. Well, I'm not going to read some of them because it's just not very nice. But anyways, in verse 18 and 19, Eglon comes and he pays tribute. So this would probably be an annual thing. So Ehud is trusted with that, which gives me more evidence to say that he was a leader among the Benjaminites. And just Israel in general, and that his presence was likely known by Eglon. In fact, Eglon makes a lot of dumb decisions, a lot of them rooted in naivete. And so he comes in, now he's armed, and all they do is they check his left side. They don't check the right. Now pause there for a minute. Pause there. I think this is a detail that from what I've seen everyone misses. How dumb is that? How dumb is that? If you're a cop or you're a security guard and you got to pat someone down, which leg you skipping? You ain't. Because I don't know if you know this, but if you could put a pocket on your left, you could put a pocket on your right. This is silly. We are to see this as a buffoon of a king running a buffoon of a nation. And so this guy can take an 18-inch dagger, tall big, the way you say in Owen County. Okay? 18 inches. And he can just waltz in there, and he'll say, all right, check me. Look, I'm not armed. Don't look at this leg. I'm not armed. And they don't check. How goofy is that? The guy's an absolute fool. So he presents the tribute, and then he tells the king there, verse 18 and 19, he has a secret message. Now, nowhere in the text do we give any impression that Ehud is a prophet. And so the king, now I want you to notice this, the word message there, usually it's an ambiguous word. It usually means word, a message. But it could also be referencing an object. Now, so you see the play on words. He has a secret message. Shh, I got something to tell you, but I don't want these people here. But the word message also means item, thing. So the message is a sword. So it's a divine message of judgment through the dagger that he was able to sneak in. And of course, what does he do is he thinks, okay, maybe he's going to bring more tribute, or maybe he's going to praise my leadership or something. Again, he's a buffoon. So the king is now, orders everyone to leave, thus put himself in a very dangerous situation. In fact, he tells them, silence their, verse 19. I have a secret message for you, O king, and he commanded silence. Now that word silence means more than just, can you all just give me a minute? It's a word often describing sacred silence. Let me give you one example. I had like 5 earlier, and I took them all out. Be silent before the Lord God, for the day of the Lord is near. Amos uses this language. Habakkuk uses this language. You'll find it several places in the Bible. I think the Psalms use it. It describes holy silence. So what you have here is a king who thinks much of himself. And so he tells everyone to leave him alone with this Israelite. Already we know this is buffoonery. This is absolute foolishness. I mean, do you think the Secret Service would ever do this for the President of the United States? There may be a handful of people they let them to do that. Their wife and their children. And maybe not all of their children. You don't, the Secret Service don't leave the president like that. I mean, I can tell you when the governor's at the Capitol by the presence of security. Went over there today, and I thought, oh, governor's here. Yeah, there they are. You know, and they're very serious. They'll stand out there. They will not smile at you. They will not acknowledge your existence unless you force them to. And you don't want to do that. Like, they scare me to death, you know. And they got the little earpieces in. They're not going to leave the governor. And these people do. These are fools that we have. And so, what does he do? The room is empty. This is opportunity. You can almost see him sneaking up into the cool room here because it's hot. And he's just getting closer. And in fact, you'll notice the subtle change of the message. Verse 20, he came to him sitting alone in the cool roof chamber. There's a lot of debate as to what all that means in the Hebrew. I have a message from God for you. Notice before it was a secret message. Now it's a divine message. And the divine message is that of judgments. And so he thrust the sword in, the dagger in. That word will be used later in chapter 4 to describe the nail going through the man's skull, the tent peg. And he is dead. So we get there in verse 23. Ehud went out into the porch, closed the door of the roof chamber behind him, and locked them. The king is dead or is dying, and he wastes no time escaping. He locks everything from the inside, and he's able to escape. Again, there's a lot of debate because the Hebrew is bizarre, and we don't have all the details as to what the palace would have looked like, although one commentary had the blueprints. I don't know where he found that. But he's able to make his way out secretly. And of course, he's aided by the fact all the guards leave that way. And so he can sneak out. He just locked the door behind them. Again, it's just buffoonery, absolute buffoonery. You couldn't get away with this. It's like a bad version of National Treasure or something like that. But you'll notice that by leaving the dagger in, he probably, some scholars say that he's avoiding any stains on his own clothes, which would allow him to sneak in a crowd more. Now, that seems like conjecture, but whatever. Now, verse 24. When he had gone, the servants came, and when they saw that the doors of the roof chamber were locked, they thought, surely he is relieving himself in the closet of the cool chamber. They waited till they were embarrassed, but when they did not open the door of the roof chamber, when they did, but when he still did not open the doors, I'll read it right, of the roof chamber, they took the key and opened it, and there lay the Lord dead on the floor. Now, this is even more ridiculous, isn't it? It's written in a ridiculous format. His servants, his attendees, look like the Three Stooges characters, falling over themselves. Now, my Bible says embarrassed. Does your Bible say anything else? They waited until they were embarrassed.
Mine says
Embarrassed.
Embarrassed?
mine also says that it kind of landed on the earth. Is that a typo, or they didn't have full or instructions?
I'd be interested. So mine said floor, yours says earth. I'd be interested in looking at that in the Hebrew. Earth, the word land is the word earth. They're interchangeable. So I wonder if there's something going on there. I don't know.
I had a mental picture of you. Jabba the Hutt.
Say that again.
Jabba the Hutt.
Jabba no Bunga. Oh, I never thought I'd get a Star Wars reference out of you. I tell you, we've won the victory. There we go. We got Star Wars. If I can get Lord of the Rings out of you, man, I won't have anything else to accomplish in life. So the servants are thinking, man, that's taking a long time. And it's interesting, they never inquire of Ehud. They never even think about him. They know they left another man in there. You see the buffoonery. These guys are crazy. They think, oh, he is using the restroom. Well, I'll just wait out here. There's another man who is paying tribute. He's an enemy in there. And they think, oh, just give him a little bit more time. And then they wait to a point where it's like, this is getting ridiculous. And then they have to force themselves in. They're able to find another key. Now, I do want you to notice this. Verse 25, it uses the phrase, their Lord was dead. Now, this is interesting to me. What the writer does is he almost forgets Eglon's name. So he is named in verse 12, 14, 15, and twice in verse 17. Is never named again after verse 17. In verse 18, he is called king. In verse 25, Lord. After that, it's all pronouns. So you see what's happening here is that in the narrative there's these subtle hints that this guy, he is losing prominence and power. Now, it's told in the form of judgment, of death, and all that. But the way his story is told is you can see the decline of that. And Ehud, on the other hand, is becoming this hero. So it's the ending of one administration and one power and the rising of, and really the return power of another. And I think it's a way of making fun of Eglon. I mean, he was that fool, we forgot his name. Yeah. And you'll notice that he came in, verse 26, he came in by the idols, he leaves by the idols. Those could be actual markers, but it is a reminder of just how pagan Israel had become. Well, with Israel dead, they fight. Start in verse 26. Ehud escaped while they delayed. They dilly-dally is another way you can translate that. He passed beyond the idols and escaped to Sarah. We don't know where that is. I'm not sure that city's mentioned anywhere else. I don't recall. When he arrived, he sounded the trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim. That's going to be the main detail for us. The people of Israel went down with him from the hill country, and he was their leader. And he said to them, follow after me, for the Lord has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand. So they went down after him and seized the fords of the Jordan against the Moabites, and did not allow anyone to pass over. They killed at that time about 10,000 of the Moabites, all strong, able-bodied men, not a man escaped. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest for 80 years. So we got to move quickly here. So now that the king's dead, they fight. He's in Ephraim. Ephraim borders the tribe of Benjamin, is a very powerful tribe. So Judah is probably the most powerful. Ephraim will be the main tribe of the northern tribes. So this is going to be one of the more powerful ones. Now, unlike the story of Othniel, we're actually given the military strategy, actually quite brilliant, is they seize the fords of the Jordan River. And what this does is it prevents the Moabites from retreating, but it also prevents the Moabites from bringing in reinforcements. And so this is a great strategy. It shows up later in chapter 12. It says, the Gileadites captured the fords of the Jordan against the Ephraimites. Well, here's Ephraim. So you can see the geography plays a role here. They seized him and slaughtered him at the fords of the Jordan. 42,000 fell. So it's the same strategy used, I believe, in chapter 12. So it's a well-established one. If you control water sources, you can win a lot of battles. I mean, it's how we won the Revolutionary War. The French blockaded. They came and sat in their ships, and then some helped out Washington, and we won, beat the Brits, and then we didn't go help them out a few years later. Anyways, notice that detail in verse 29. They killed, at that time, 10,000 of the Moabites. Here's this little detail. All were strong, able-bodied men. Is that a detail we need? You would imagine, if you go to war, you're probably strong, able-bodied men.
Mine says lusty.
Lusty. Interesting. What translation you got? You got King Jimmy? Okay, the real Bible. Okay, interesting. Lusty.
My class over 80?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's interesting. Lusty, King James. Yeah, so I think what we're supposed to do here is we are to contrast the army with the king. So what you have is a once mighty nation ruled by a fool. I just think it's fascinating. But then you'll notice that the Moabites did not fall because they were all like the king. Even against the strong men, Israel triumphed, or Ephraim triumphed. Just a little detail. I mean, we don't need it, but it does highlight the characters in the story. 80 years. 80 years is basically 2 generations in biblical timeline. So it's 40 years, a wilderness generation. This is double that. So almost a century of peace. So this is quite a military victory and leadership by Ehud. Yeah. Now we're not given a lot of details about did they get rid of idols. You know, we didn't get into the detail. Just that in this moment the Moabites were pushed out, and they went back over into their land. And this gives them 80 years to take possession of Israel. You know, just compare the 18 that Eglon had to now 80 Israel has. This allows that process of taking possession of the land and then preferably bring in proper worship. I just have 2 thoughts, really just final thoughts, not really application. 2 thoughts on this text. One, is Ehud a hero or a villain? This is the question we will ask ourselves over and over again. Very few of the judges are good people. And this is actually why a lot of people don't like the book of Judges. It's why we struggle with the book of Esther. Is because you read it, and I think I've told this story before. We taught through Esther at Goshen over at the house Sunday night, wasn't it, something like that. And Miss Janie, she goes, Brother Kyle, I can't wait till we're done with this book. I do not like Esther. I'm like, what's Bible? What are you talking about? She goes, well, she did things I just don't think was right. Like, it sounds like to me you're reading it right. Yeah? So what you have here is that Yahweh doesn't play a prominent role in the story. He's there. He strengthens the Moabites. He raises up Ehud. And later at the end, he says he has a divine message from God, which is judgment. And then he organizes the Ephraimites by saying, the Lord has given your enemies into your hand. But beyond that, he doesn't play a prominent role. And so we're not entirely told what was his motivations. Could have just been an opportunity. Could he see that the king is weak, therefore the nation is weak? Maybe that's it. I mean, I don't know. But this is going to be a theme throughout Judges, is we are rooting for people who are terrible. One of my favorite fictional series. Years ago, when I started reading fiction, I read classics, and then I thought I need to read popular books that everyone's reading, just to sort of understand modern man. Okay? So I picked this series. I mean, in terms of storytelling, love it. The problem is that there is no one in the story worth rooting for. And that was actually something that jumped off the page by like the 3rd book. These people are terrible. So there's 2 main characters, and I don't like them. They're intriguing characters. This is why it's a good book. They're not good people. And I think, man, if they win, is it a good win for everybody? Now, the villains in the story are almost caricatures. They're just terrible people. But the main characters are just awful. And that's what you get with Judges. Yeah, and that's the beauty of Judges. So that's why when we overemphasize the left hand thing, that's just a strategy. This fool won't even check because he thinks everyone's right-handed. And he apparently doesn't know that all the Benjaminites use their left hand. What a fool. But what we do is we make that the main point of Ehud. And I wonder if maybe we get the first hints that there is a decline in the quality of leadership in terms of their character. It's hinted here that God doesn't play a prominent role. Shamgar's one verse, Deborah, that you kind of Barak's a bit of a coward. And then you're going to get Gideon and Samson, and it just gets worse to the point of Jephthah. And I think we're starting to see that decline. And we're to ask ourselves, are they heroes or villains? And what we get in the end is that God can use broken people to do incredible things. In fact, God only uses broken people to do incredible things.
That's what I was thinking, because it sounded to me like we're just like who they were.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't see any difference. You know, another thing, you can go reading about the Second World War and find somebody that tells the truth. We did some pretty bad things.
Yeah, yeah. I mentioned probably a month or so ago a new documentary on Netflix on World War II. It's excellent. And they do not shy away from saying that what Americans did, we did some bad things.
The thing
Yeah.
I found out from all this stuff is the person who is guilty of war crime is the loser. Because the
Yeah.
war defines what a war crime is.
Yeah, look what FDR did to Chinese Americans during World War II. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So let me give you one more point. We're done. I know we're running late. And I think this is the big idea, is that we are fools. I think the reason this story is told in a humorous fashion is because you get to the end of the story, like, okay, the Moabites, those dummies, they just, oh man, those buffoons. And then you start thinking about it. If they were really that foolish, how did Israel let them conquer them for 18 years? I think that's one of the main questions we get from this text. We're laughing at Eglon, we're making fun of the Moabites, and rightly so. Everything they did was just absolute madness. And then you think, but then how do they have all the power and control? What does that say about Israel? What does it say about the Ephraimites, the Benjaminites, and the Reubenites? So I just wonder if maybe the writer just subtly is taking the Bible and turning into a mirror and say, now you see yourself? You're the fool. You're the fool. You've let all this stuff in. God has given you the land, and you've just handed it right back over to the pagans, the ones that God has liberated you from. This is the story of Judges. They're given the land. God says, just clear it. It's the promised land, land flowing with milk and honey. You have rest forever and ever and ever. What do? They say, well, what if we try the other gods? They're more popular. I like their songs better. I like their teaching better. You tell me which one's more foolish, forgetting to check the right thigh for a dagger, or letting false gods into our lives, hearts, and homes? I think in the end, we're the fools here. But anyways, we miss anything?
I'm going to ask you another question.
Yeah.
When Joshua went into Jericho, before he went over there, he met one of the angels, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked him, whose side are you on?
Yeah.
And he told him, neither.
Yeah.
I think you get a concept on neither, you start figuring out what God wants and what he doesn't want.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the commander of the Lord.
I'm constantly thinking about the Second World War. You got the Germans flying airplanes, the Americans flying airplanes, the British, and they're fighting and killing, and they're going to mass or whatever before they get in the plane.
Yeah. Yeah. I shared the story some time ago, this is a Christmas story, that on Christmas in 1944, something like that, or maybe in World War I, so whatever the years, they're at the end.